It's back and bigger than ever. It's the unofficial 40 from Soonerscoop.com. Now, here's the entire Sooner Scoop crew. Carrie, Josh, Eddie, and Bob.
All right, welcome back. It is another edition of the unofficial 40 podcast. Eddie and Carrie on a special vacation edition for Josh and Bob. I think Bob is probably in Orlando. Hell, is that where he's at, Eddie?
No, I think he's going down to Kentucky or something.
That's right.
He's not going to Disneyland this time, or Disney
always
World,
think when
one of those two.
People with kids go on vacation, they're just going to the hell of Orlando.
That's why I'm not married and don't have kids. I don't go on vacation.
That's exactly because you don't want to go to Disneyland?
Or
That's why you're not married?
I just disappear.
Anyway, we want to welcome in a special guest. We brought in a heavy hitter to fill in and basically just waste some time during the offseason, and that is our publisher of HuskerOnline.com at Rivals.com, Sean Callahan, is joining us. And Sean, welcome to the Thunderdome.
Thank you for having me on. And I can tell you, I've been to both Disneyland and Disney World with kids. And we went to Disney World in July. And let me tell you,
boy.
You're just dead. I mean, like your step counter, you're like 15, 20,000 steps a day in the parks. And I mean, you go to bed at 8 o'clock at night. You're so tired and exhausted from the trip out there. So
we did do Disneyland because the Rose Bowl. Yeah, I forgot about that.
Oh yeah, you get to go into the Rose Bowl. Yes, and you probably got to tape the OU players riding the teacups or something, right?
I think we bypassed all that because they had like the. Oh, what was it? It was like
they were opening.
Was it Aaron Taylor that did the like the emceeing for some kind of ride that they had him out there?
It was Marcellus Wiley.
Oh, Marcellus, that's right. That's exactly what it was.
And he wore a T-shirt looked like he just pulled it out of the dirty laundry pile.
He's like, I really have to go over there, and they're like, yeah, we're paying you to get over there.
But they were opening like the new Avengers, like it used to be the Tower of Terror, I think, and now it was like the Gravity. But like they sent out like press stuff of them being dropped, like it was like a gravity thing. I don't know, but no, it was cool. We got to interview all the players, and walking through there, I'm just like, we were in the cars part. I would say this: I don't have kids. I don't have any wish to go to Disneyland, but just like walking around that and seeing how big everything is, it's like they built a city. I mean, it is ridiculous just to see it.
Yeah, it is. And honestly, Orlando's that much bigger. I mean, California is laid out a little bit easier. You got the two parks, right or left. You go. California Adventure Park has alcohol. Disney, the original Disney, does not have beer. So if you're wanting to have a cold adult beverage,
well, they got you drink the countries though at the Epcot Center though, right? At Disney World.
Oh yeah, now Disney World, I think they all have it, but the old school original Magic Kingdom in California.
Oh, okay.
But yeah, it's a really good time. I mean, your kids, you got to do it when your kids are young, and we did it, and we'll probably go back one more time. But we're hitting the beach this July. We're gonna go to Florida in about a month.
I should just say this first off, so people understand. Sean Callahan does not endorse any way that we carry ourselves and do business at Soonerscoop.com. Sean, I'm surprised you came on the podcast first off, but Sean's kind of like the parental unit. Like, I don't know if you guys should cuss as much as you do, or I don't know. Like, I remember we made a Twitter page for the Crimson Corner, and it was Gabe Eichert and Jared Followell flipping the bird. And Sean was like, "Are you sure you want to do that and represent yourself that way?" I'm like, "Yeah, we're kind of a bunch of assholes."
Yeah, no.
I mean, does that not are Nebraska fans not kind of like do they not have like that barstool attitude? Are they just super nice everywhere? Like
I wouldn't say
just
that. I mean,
can't play it that way.
Oh, I mean, they're definitely mean on the message boards and social media, and I mean, people are going into this year. There's a lot of angst and anxiety, on Frost and the season, and our boards are pretty negative. I mean, about as negative as you're going to see, because they know how difficult the schedule is for Nebraska and what they're facing this year. And Frost has had 3 straight losing seasons. So Nebraska fans are nice, but the vocal ones, as you know, on any fan base, they're on the message boards, they're on Twitter, and they control the conversation a lot of the days on there. So no, it's the same everywhere. But in general, we've got a lot of older fans around the state that are very loyal. I mean, they come out rain or shine, no matter what. And, that's what makes Nebraska special. I mean, it's the smallest populated state along with West Virginia in the Power Five. And they have, they sell out that stadium every game since the 1960s.
Well, and I wanted to go back and I'm boxing out Eddie here. But this was what I wanted to first talk to you about, is something we talked about a week ago. We had kind of just a conversation on the phone. I think Eddie probably feels the same way. But watching how the Big Ten treated Nebraska when all they wanted to do was play football and just let us schedule some games, and to watch the Big Ten treat them the way that they did, I was just from my perspective, I was sitting, I don't know how you felt, Eddie, but I was like, holy shit, they're treating Nebraska like a redheaded stepchild.
They did the same to Ohio State, did they not?
I don't know. I don't think they did to Ohio State.
I guess what I'm talking about is all the emails that have come out since then with the correspondent as far as they were going to go the same route as Nebraska. Maybe that's what I'm thinking.
But I mean, Sean, how the hell does Nebraska get treated that way?
Yeah, I mean, the best way to describe the Big Ten, I mean, it's a really snooty, uppity country club, and Nebraska's the member at the club that orders the Busch Light tall boy at the bar. I mean, they're kind of, I mean, they're the outlier member. I mean, their academics are by far the lowest of the 14 member institutions. I mean, you look at Michigan and Minnesota and Illinois and Wisconsin. I mean, those are some of the top public schools in the country. Then you have Northwestern down the line, and Nebraska is they rank more like a lot of the Big 12 teams. I mean, they're on par with Oklahoma and schools like that. And they were brought in the Big Ten for football. I mean, Tom Osborne
and money,
and Harvey Perlman, they kind of brokered all this in 2009. And if you go back to 2009, Ndamukong Suh had just almost beat Texas and Dallas, and Texas started to kind of do all the stuff they did, and it led to the conversations. And I think the Big Ten obviously took a bet, you know what, we're going to bring in Nebraska's back on the come. Bo Pelini was at his height, and they signed him before the 2010 season started, and they still had a very good team in 2010. Blew a 17-0 lead in Dallas to Oklahoma in the Big 12 title game that year. But yeah, since they've been in the Big Ten now 10 years, they've only made the title game once. They've had a few 9, 10-win type years, but nothing better than that. And they haven't had one of those in a long time, since 2016. So I think that the notion is you don't get a chair at the table. How dare you speak up, Nebraska, because you haven't done your part in football. You're the lowest ranked member of our academics. And so, no, you don't get to be the guy that speaks out against the other 13 people here in the country club. And it's interesting. They were the ones that did. And the media people, the national guys, and you can probably guess who some of those guys are. I mean, it was almost like they were in cahoots. I mean, they were like, we're going to trash Nebraska and rip Scott Frost for simply wanting to play football. In the Big Ten and Kevin Warren, I mean, you got the sense that they were operating, with some of these guys to make sure these narratives got out. But it really changed when Nebraska kind of orchestrated a deal where the players sued the Big Ten and they got them to court. I'll never forget that day. I was sitting here in my office, and Mike Flood, the former speaker of this, he's a state senator here in Nebraska. He's also an attorney, and he led the charge. And Mike Flood, someone from his office said, "Hey, you want to get down to the courthouse?" They put in the notion or the motion or the suit against the conference at 1:00. The Big Ten had to appear in a Nebraska Lincoln court at 3:00. They had 2 hours notice to get their attorney and it was on Zoom, obviously. Wow. At that point.
Yeah.
And at that point I was like, holy smoke. And they told me, they're like, we thought we had about a 25% chance of getting this through. And then they forced the Big Ten to appear, and they didn't have any, the guy was like, usually we get time to prepare. We have nothing prepared to speak right now. And then they pushed it down later. But once it got to court, that's when it changed. Then the other, people in the Big Ten were really rooting for it and kind of got behind it. And I think once people saw other leagues were playing, I think the Big Ten bet on the wrong horse, and they assumed everybody was going to be where they were, and they were wrong, as we know. And they had to come. If the Big Ten didn't play this fall, who knows where we'd be right now. I mean, it would be very interesting because that I watched that spring football FCS stuff, and it wasn't the same.
Right.
It wasn't the same. North Dakota State didn't look the same to me, and I mean, just some of these teams just didn't feel the same watching.
It felt
them on
like
the field.
G League kind of NBA G League. Yeah.
And if Nebraska or like Ohio State was playing in the spring this year, for example, none of those guys that got drafted were going to play. So it would have been a joke. I mean, it would have been really, really, hard to watch and whatnot. So they did the right thing in the end. But yeah, it was a crazy deal. Nebraska was kind of the first guy that swung their sword and spoke out, and they were criticized. But in the end, they were the real people that got football back. Ohio State can kind of say we were too, but Nebraska was the ones that came out and took the punches right away at the conference.
With all that said, I guess in a way, I mean, has the last decade been worth it for Nebraska? And if not, and they were still in the Big 12, and we can't, I guess, go back and look at what has happened over the last decade, but would Nebraska still be where they were at the time? Would they have fallen off, do you think, had they not gone to the Big 10?
Yeah, I think they'd be better off in the Big 12 competitively. Just because the type of guys you need in this league, it's a different kind of player.
Sure.
And Bo Pelini had Nebraska built as an elite defense in the Big 12, which is very hard to do. He figured out how to, to get the D linemen, the linebackers, hybrid guys, and they were rolling. I mean, they had it figured out, and they had to completely change what they do because that type of scheme didn't work in the Big 10 necessarily, at least when they first joined the league with all the tight ends and fullbacks, and everyone's just bigger in this conference across the board. But here's the difference is the money. But the really interesting thing is the additional monies Nebraska makes, most of it goes back to the school. So they get like $55 million a year. And I think probably OU gets 40, 38. I don't know what the number is.
It's about 40. Yeah.
When it's all said and done and the third tier rights are added in, I would imagine.
Yeah.
So they get the 55 from the Big 10, but 10 of that every year just goes right back to the school. So the chance,
not the athletic department, you're saying.
Yeah. And so Nebraska gives 5 of it to the chancellor to use at his discretion. And the other $5 million goes to scholarships for general students. So when you break it down like that, it's really only like $5 million more dollars. And they've been able to take that a long way. And they've done a ton with that money in terms of facilities. I mean, they're building a $155 million new football facility, weight room, training table, student complex. And they broke ground on it this last month. But I think the issue is the university now is getting used to that $10 million per year they're getting as well. So and then the professors and the school side, they really like to be in the Big 10. So
sure,
they're not. Long story short, they're not going back, even though there are definitely some things that make it feel right. And I think politically, Nebraskans really felt out of place during the COVID and all this stuff last year. I mean, most people were like sensible about it. You know what? Yeah, we respect COVID and whatnot, but we think we can still play football and figure it out and get it done. We think we should be able to have some fans in our stadium and things like that. But the Big 10, said nope. They were like the government. They said we're going to control all, and we're going to make those decisions for you, and you can't have fans, and we're going to tell you all these different rules for practicing and whatnot and testing. I mean, the Big 10 Conference, the players tested like 7 days a week almost. I mean, it was ridiculous, and the school pay millions of dollars to do all the testing protocols. And just all the things that were required to even play football. But yeah, I just think there's too much political stuff with the university side that would make it very difficult to go back into the Big 12.
How close is the fan base to, I guess, not turning on Scott Frost? Because I don't know if that would ever happen just from the outside looking in, but
we saw it happen with Josh Heupel. It can happen.
Sure, it can happen anywhere. It just seems like I just keep going back to like what happened, because my first memory of like OU Nebraska is obviously, it's Eric Crouch running up and down the sidelines against Oklahoma and just basically, or Scott Frost like beating the shit out of Oklahoma. Like, what has happened?
Yeah, I think his first year he showed everybody what they could be and got everybody excited. I mean, they started out 0-6 his first year, but it was a crazy first 6 games and probably could have won or should have won 2 or 3 of them. But then in the back end of the schedule, they went 4-2 they had Ohio State on the ropes in Columbus. I mean, it was a big noon kickoff game, and J.D. Spielman, who's now at TCU, dropped a touchdown pass that would have put Nebraska up by 2 possessions in the fourth quarter on Ohio State in Columbus. And then they lost to Iowa in overtime, or on a last-second field goal, excuse me. And so they were, like his first year, you're like, wow, they went 4-2. They showed a lot of promise. The problem is the roster turned over pretty quick. He had some NFL guys that first year that were gone. He had a running back, a receiver, an outside linebacker, just some offensive linemen, core guys that kind of team together. Then the leadership just fell apart in his second year. He had a new center that couldn't snap the ball to Martinez. Martinez had 5 or 6 snaps over his head in 2019. They didn't have very good receivers. They didn't have a running back situation figured out. So everything just kind of fell apart in 2019. Then Martinez got hurt, and they were ranked. They were picked to win the West in 2019 by everybody, and they went out to Colorado and they blew a 17-0 lead in Boulder, where 65% of Folsom Field was Nebraska fans. I mean, it was unbelievable how many Nebraska fans took over Colorado's football stadium that day. And, that was a turning point because they were ranked in the top 20. They went out there and run away with it. I think the season has a different feel. But then from that point on, I think the team lost their confidence. And then, you go to 2020, it was a conference-only schedule. They only played 8 games. It was very, very difficult to kind of measure the season. I mean, shoot, they opened up the season with Ohio State, Penn State, and Northwestern. I mean, those were their first 3 games. And then they had Wisconsin on there that got canceled for COVID. So the way the schedule was built, it was very difficult to measure last year. So that's why this year is so big. They have 3 games that they're probably going to be favored in, for sure 2 of the 3. And I think they'll be favored at Illinois to open it up. Then they go to OU. And so I think for them to have the kind of year they want this year, they need to start out 3-0 and go into Norman as a respectable team at that point and see where they're at. Because this is the best roster Frost has had by far. I mean, they have everybody back on defense, and they've added some really good receivers on offense that are going to be the deepest group they've had since Frost has been here. So the pieces are there for them to be a much better team this year.
Full disclosure, I think I lost money on that 2019 Nebraska game. I think I had a Colorado game. I think I had the Cornhuskers in that.
What I find interesting, Sean, something we haven't really talked about is, I mean, for most people, it's ancient history. Tom Osborne moving on to why did Ohio's coach Frank Solich, his name fell out of my head there for a second. That's how long ago it was. And then, as you mentioned, you had Callahan there that kind of changed the offensive culture a little bit. Pelini was more defensive focused. I'm just curious, we all know there's probably been a lot of debate over the years in Nebraska about what type of offense that Nebraska should be running. Is everyone kind of behind having, a wide open spread passing offense in Nebraska, or you still have factions of we should be more of a power running game team?
Yeah, I think what they want to be is a team that can run with a physical presence out of the pistol and out of the spread. I mean, they're rarely under center, but it was funny in 2019 they played Ohio State and Frost came out with an old school power I formation for one series, and Nebraska drove the ball right down the field on Ryan Day. And, Ryan Day had to take I would call it a version of a basketball coach timeout because they were just so thrown off by it. And everybody College Game Day was in Lincoln too for that game. And everybody was just yeah, it still works. And then we never saw it again. That was the only time they ever ran the old school system, and they drove it right down on Ohio State and Chase Young, and Day was flustered. I mean, but it was a trick play though. I mean, we have never seen it, but they will use tight ends a lot. They have a very, very deep group of tight ends right now. 2 veteran 5th-year guys that are NFL level. So they will feature the tight ends and have those guys out there a lot. They have bigger wide receivers on the perimeter that will be much better blockers. And that's part of this offense too. I mean, Chip Kelly, even when he was at Oregon, they were this up-tempo spread, but they always had a physical running presence at running back that could pound you. When you study some of those Oregon running backs in the past, and then they always had great perimeter blocking. Well, Nebraska, the last few years, has had terrible perimeter blocking, really, really poor blockers on the edge, and they've had inconsistencies at running back since 2018. Divino Zigbo is in the NFL now. He was a 1,000-yard rusher in Frost's first year. Since then, they just have not had that consistency. So what ends up happening is Adrian Martinez has to be like the running back and the quarterback, and that's where they've got to get it fixed. Martinez can't carry the ball like 18 or 20 times a game and expect to make it through a year. He needs to have it be about 10 a game. And, what's ending up happening is they're so inefficient on these early downs. They're getting like 1 or 2 yards on first down runs and whatnot, that they're in these 3rd and 7s, 3rd and 8s. And Martinez has to run for a lot of those and get them. And that's great, but it's not a long-term sustainable formula in this conference. I mean, your quarterback's just going to get smoked in the Big Ten, the way these defenses play you. And you can't have Martinez taking those 7 or 8 extra carries per game because of the other deficiencies on your offense.
By the way, you mentioned tight ends. I'm sure Scott Frost is going to go back and watch that Iowa State film for the last couple of years with Charlie Kolar. How odd has that been, seeing Iowa State become good?
Yeah, it's weird because
although they can't beat Iowa, I mean they screw the Big 12 every year.
It's the yearly disappointment in the non-conference.
Some stupid non-conference game, and then they end up battling for the it just makes the Big 12 look so stupid.
I guess OU loses their conference game at some point during the
Either
season.
Kansas
it's just
State
like,
or Iowa
yeah,
State.
It's like a flip
lose.
the coin type thing.
Yeah, the Iowa State thing is, and then even Kansas State, when they beat like OU back-to-back years, and Kleiman, I know, had a down year. And a lot of Kleiman's down year last year had to do with Skylar Thompson getting hurt. I mean, I know Kansas State fans.
You had to face Skylar Thompson, and nobody else did the rest of the season.
And I know Kansas State fans were upset the way the year ended, but they had their quarterback out, so they felt. But what Kleiman's done, and obviously what Campbell has done, it does get your attention as Nebraska fans here. And, it frustrates you because you feel like when you look at the roster just on paper, Nebraska's got a better roster than those teams do, particularly and that's where coaching and culture and
evaluation, you have to take that into account too. I mean, Iowa State, they're recruiting kids from the same, recruiting areas that Nebraska should be recruiting from. And they're evaluating and developing kids at a higher rate, it seems, right now.
Well, and here's the difference, though. Like, Nebraska fans, they want to be ranked high in the recruiting rankings. Well, Iowa State fans, Kansas State fans, they don't really get into the rankings. They just kind of say, you know what, Campbell's...
Their minds, it doesn't matter because it's never mattered.
Yeah, and Campbell's a good coach. We believe in this guy, and whoever he takes, we believe in it. Where I think at Nebraska, if you took a swing on a 2-star or kind of a 3-star that doesn't really have any Power 5 offers or very little power, like no major, the fans start questioning your coaching staff publicly, and they're like, oh man, they struck out on their top board guys and they're reaching on these bottom guys now. And I think that's the battle Nebraska faces, because the fan base wants them to recruit nationally, and I think the coaches do in some respects, and they've done that. They've had good classes, but in some cases, like Wan'Dale Robinson, he came here and it almost felt like they had to like live up to the promises and expectations that he wanted, and they weren't doing it to what he wanted, so he left. So it's a fine line Nebraska has to walk. They want to be like Iowa and Wisconsin in this league, but they also want to recruit a prettier player than those schools. And I don't think you can have it both ways. Iowa and Wisconsin recruit a ton of 3-stars, and they develop them and they win with them. And Nebraska has recruited a lot of 4-stars, and a lot of them haven't made it here for just various different reasons. I mean, last year during COVID, they brought in like 6 Florida kids, and I think 4 or 5 of them were 4-stars. Every one of them left except one, I think. Every one of them's gone. And it's unbelievable. And particularly all of the Miami kids left. And, I think they've got to find the right kids that want to be at Nebraska. They're good football players, but it doesn't necessarily mean they're good football players to play for Nebraska. And that's the challenge I think Nebraska faces now, is getting those types of kids that are the right fit to win here.
kind of seems like the same thing that they did on the West Coast when they tried to get into, was it Calabasas, and brought all those kids in. Wasn't Keyshawn Johnson Jr. part of that group? And then obviously they got into a little bit of trouble, and it just didn't seem to work out.
Yeah, I'll never forget. We were in satellite camps, and we were in L.A. for the Nebraska camp out there, and that was the day after Keyshawn Jr. got in trouble for like missing workouts because he was smoking weed and got into a bunch of trouble and got caught by the police. And Keyshawn Sr. drove like 2 hours to this camp in LA to like talk to Mike Riley. And I mean, that was kind of the beginning of the end and of that deal. And then Riley's last year was that year as well. But yeah, all those, there's only one of those Calabasas or Nebraska guys left, and he's a starting safety, Markel Smuke from Calabasas High School. He's a 6-year senior on this roster now. But you're right. I mean, I think you've got to find the right blend of Midwest guys that want to play here. And then, I think the kids that they've had the most success with are Georgia and North Florida. Those tend to be better fits here. The Miami kids are unbelievable, but it just didn't work. I mean, I think the weight room and some of the different things that the culture of the program has here, it's different for some of these kids when they come up here, and they're not used to lifting and working like that. And I think if you don't do that, you're not going to play. And some of these kids from Miami they wanted to miss practice and still play in the game, and it just doesn't work that way.
It kind of reminds me of what happened to OU kind of in the mid to late 2000s is they kept losing battles for, players, that really big players. And they kind of had to ask themselves, like, should we be going after every 5-star that is out there, because we'll end up, they stay home at Texas, or they go to USC. I mean, they would go out to California, like I think like guys like Adoree Jackson and who's the Iman Marshall, was that the kid?
Yeah.
So like
he's another one in that group.
And they kept going after all these Cali kids and these modern day kids, and they would always just stay at USC. See, like Nebraska, I think of just obvious fails for them would be like a guy like Charlie Kolar, or Breece Hall. How about Breece Hall? Sure. Like we went and saw Breece Hall,
kid from Wichita.
And he's a good player. And I saw him, I was like, man, he could play at OU. But they're already committed to these guys.
Breece Hall is a legacy to Nebraska.
Oh, God.
Oh, shit.
That has to just...
I did not know that.
They took a swing on a Grayson, Georgia running back named Ronald Tompkins, who after his sophomore year was going to be like a 5-star. I mean, he was unreal in Georgia. But then he had like back-to-back multiple knee injuries his junior and senior years. And they chose his commit 2 weeks before Breece Hall committed to Iowa State. But they almost didn't push for Breece Hall's commit. He came in for a visit. But yeah, Breece Hall, in all reality, should have been probably the guy.
So he's a name that pisses off all Nebraska fans when you bring him up.
Yes and no. I don't know how well the story's told, but yeah, he's related to Jeff Smith. I mean, a former Husker player, and I mean, he's a legacy to the program. And he came up here, and they kind of went with a guy on paper that looked a little prettier from a bigger time program, but he had injury things. And the reason Nebraska got Ronald Tompkins, who went in the portal 2 weeks ago, is because of the injuries. The SEC teams didn't want him because they knew that his legs had a lot of questions. Well, he battled injuries, and then he was actually second string this year, and then he only played 19 snaps in the game. Pro Football Focus has been a great thing that we get at Rivals, and
yeah, it's great
when you can be like, yeah, he only actually played 19 snaps all year. I mean, it's just like it really magnifies sometimes when a guy leaves, why they leave, and whatnot. But yeah,
that's something that we learned too. Is like when there's a kid from the SEC country and the big programs don't want him. That doesn't, like, you can't just go out and sign that kid because he had a non-committable offer from Georgia and Alabama. Like, you got to avoid those guys because they will kill your program, because you get these guys in there that are highly rated and they're going to scare off a Breece Hall or whoever. Like, I think OU's done a really good job, but like if they win a battle in the SEC, they legitimately either win or lose to Alabama or Georgia. Like they're taking legitimate kids that they want.
Well, and like LSU and Alabama, and I'm sure Georgia's the same way. In order to commit to those programs, you have to go down there and work out in the camp.
Right.
And it's funny. North Dakota State at the FCS ranks, they're the same way. They're really strict about offering up there in Fargo. They want those, and that actually every school wishes they could do that. I'll put it that way.
Yeah.
But only like so many, like Clemson, I think can do it now too. Like there's a kid from Kansas, Jaron Kanik, ran 10.37. OU offered him, as you guys know. Nebraska was his first major offer, and Brent Venables went back into Kansas, where he's from, and they offered him this week, and he had to go out to Clemson. Though I don't know if he worked out or what he did for him, but yeah, they offered him after his visit out there. And I think the really, really good programs have that luxury to say, you'll have an offer, but it's not a committable offer until you prove it on our eyes on a practice field.
I just think it's been, the story of Oklahoma and like Lincoln Riley has built it into something that beyond what Bob Stoops was doing from a recruiting standpoint, like being able to go toe to toe with Alabama and Clemson and actually losing battles or winning battles. Like, to me, Nebraska, they've just got to realize we have to win some recruiting battles for 3 stars and 4 stars. Like, if Nebraska's thinking like we need to get the kind of kids that Clemson is getting, you're never going to build your program right now. Now you can't. Lincoln Riley has proved in a span of 2 to 3 years, you can build your program back up. But Nebraska's got to win right now before they start thinking about getting involved with guys that have offers from Alabama, Clemson, LSU, Ohio State.
Well, and this year, I think the 2020 class for them, COVID actually helped them because they had to focus more on regional. And so many of the recruits are from within 6 hours of Lincoln. And, we were able to go see a lot of them play just because of the distances. And I think that helped them bring together a class of kids from the Midwest that really wanted to be here. And then they did win some good recruiting battles. I mean, they got Thomas Fedoni, the number 1 tight end in the country out of Council Bluffs, Iowa, which is right here. And then they went into Hawaii and got the number 1 player from the state of Hawaii, because they have a Polynesian coach here on the staff, Tony Tuioti, with tons of connections there. That kind of really spearheaded that. So they did win some of the battles they wanted to win, and they were able to keep that class together. And I do think without having coaches on the road this whole year, it really cut out a lot of the drama because kids couldn't take visits. There weren't secret in-home visits going on. And that class they signed, I mean, it stayed intact, and it was a really, really good recruiting haul considering what happened with COVID. And, Nebraska builds their classes off of spring game visits, summer visit events, and obviously home game events. And they were not able to have any of that. And it's kind of catching up this year. They only have 2 commits right now, and they're going to have 8 official visitors in here on this weekend. But, there's a lot of angst right now on what direction this 2022 class is going to go because of the losing seasons they've had now, 4 in a row, going back to Mike Riley. And then on top of that, just the way the lack of visits have gone, not having kids on campus.
It's almost like Nebraska should have been where Minnesota was the last couple of years. Like, there's no reason, and in a way that sounds insane to say that Nebraska should be taking notes from a school like Minnesota, but at the same time, I feel like they've had the talent up there in Minneapolis, which is just awkward to say out loud.
They just needed a coach.
Yeah, they just needed a coach to be able to put it all
wasn't
together.
going to have a seizure every 5 minutes.
Well,
that's it.
Yeah, and you go back to 2019 like Minnesota. 2019 Minnesota went 11-2, as we know, and it started with the schedule that they had. I mean, they were set up to come out of the gates with a great record. I mean, listen to this 2019 schedule they had. They had South Dakota State, and they won by 7. They won in double overtime at Fresno State. They only beat Georgia Southern by 3. So they're 3-0, but they're 3-0. None of those wins are pretty wins. Then they beat Purdue, a bad Purdue team in 2019 by 7. Then they beat Illinois, a bad Illinois team. Then they played Nebraska. Then they played Rutgers, and they played Maryland. I mean, talk about like the all-time program winning schedule. They were able to go 8-0 before Penn State came in there, and then they elevated.
Yeah, that Penn State game seemed like a bigger deal than it probably was.
Yeah, and then they beat Penn State to get to 9-0, And then they had just 3 games left at that point. They lost to Iowa and they lost to Wisconsin.
Sure.
And then they beat Northwestern. So a lot of it was that schedule. And I know in some ways this Frost is going to took a ton of flack for even thinking about not playing that OU game, but I think he was trying to build like a 2019 Minnesota schedule where they had a string of games where they could get to like 5-0. And with that said, they do have a schedule that they should get to 4-1. I think out of the gates, Illinois, Fordham, Buffalo, OU. Obviously, they're going to be a big dog, and then Michigan State. So they have a schedule this year at Nebraska to get off to a good start. And I think that's the key. And that's what jump-started Minnesota's season. And unfortunately, Nebraska has never had the schedule to do it when you play Ohio State out of the gates, or you have just different things happen. Like the opening game of the Frost era against Akron was canceled. And they tried to play it on Sunday, and Akron got the hell out of town. Terry Bowden did not want to play, and they left. So just some of the things that they could have had to jumpstart momentum, they've just never been able to have those, unfortunately.
So I know our time is running short, and we kept you longer than I think we said in the first
I'm
place.
fine,
so,
guys.
It should be noted, we started the podcast at 11, and that wasn't because Fox made us.
Yeah, how does you guys at Nebraska have to play a lot of 11? I know, like, we have to remove ourselves from the discussion because we love 11 o'clock games. I mean, it's the
very
best.
selfish. We can get done early.
Yes. But I understand the fans hate it because they want to go tailgate and drink and get juiced up for the game, and it takes away from that. But because your television package is so tied in with Fox, I know Nebraska, Ohio State has played a bunch of 11 o'clock games too.
But it's a noon game for Ohio State. Like, I feel like that hour is just so different mentally for the fan
Critical.
base.
Yeah, and people have talked about, like, could they just reshuffle the times a little bit and go noon Central, 3:30 Central on Fox? But it's all about this 11, 2:30, 6:30 block that they run these networks with, and ABC has actually moved their times up to 6:30. There's no longer a 6 p.m. affiliate newscast on football Saturdays. And, it used to be you played 11, 2:30, and 7, so you could let your affiliates have their newscast at 6. And that was why ABC went that route. Well, they've eliminated that newscast, and it's just a 6:30 start time now. So, the package itself, Nebraska played every game this year. I think the Iowa game was at like 1. It was 2 hours later, which was beautiful on Black Friday. And then they had to play. They played at Rutgers on a Friday night on December 19th. I mean, it was unbelievable. We had to travel out to Rutgers days before Christmas on short rest on the final game of the year for a game in an empty stadium at night. The Big Ten just screwed Nebraska on that draw. They ended up winning that game on the road and whatnot. But yeah, other than that, every other game was 11. And I think this year people were fine with it because you weren't in the stadium. You're like, you know what? I'm going to watch the game, and then I'll have the rest of my Saturday to do what I got to do. But yeah, when you talk about fan bases coming down, I think the perfect scenario is your opening game or two's at night for the heat and the tailgating. And then after that, only the really big games are at night. And then, I think 2:30 is the ideal time everybody really likes. I mean, I think 2:30, you get the best of both worlds.
I always liked that as a fan, yeah. I mean, I love night games too, but 2:30 was great just because you could catch a little football before and you catch a little after.
Right, and you get to come down for lunch, and you get lunch somewhere and get a few beers, and you walk in the stadium. Now, is OU, are they full alcohol sales?
They are now, yeah. Mm-hmm. It's been a couple of years now.
Are they keg beer or are they twist-offs?
I think it's half and half. I think they have draft like in the club section that you can go up and get a draft keg beer, and then
craft beers too in the stadium.
I guess this tells you how big of a loser I am. I've never bought a beer at the stadium just because we've been covering it. I think it is keg beer, but I'm not positive about that.
And it's Budweiser because they got a deal with Budweiser.
So there's no alcohol in the stadium, but it's I think the ball's rolling here. Garth Brooks, I'm sure you guys saw, is doing a concert in Memorial Stadium.
It's going to be awesome.
And he sold out 86,000 tickets in like 90 minutes.
Did he add 3 shows like he did last time he was in Oklahoma?
Well, he only does that in the arenas because those are 15,000 seat arenas. He's just doing all the shows.
Because he can do
in
86,000 tickets at once. That's pretty good.
It's awesome.
And so alcohol, like everyone knows they're going to do something with alcohol in the stadium. There's no way you could have a Garth Brooks concert of this size and not have alcohol.
But see, U2 played at Memorial Stadium, and they served alcohol. Like they brought in alcohol to serve.
Probably did for
They
the
did in
Rolling
the
Stones
stadium.
too, way back when,
Yeah,
right?
probably.
So yeah, that's what we don't know what they're going to do, but I think there's going to be some permits and whatnot, and then I think you'll see basketball and baseball get it, but I think by 22 or 23. It wouldn't be surprising to me at all if you saw beer in Memorial Stadium.
That's interesting. Sean, let's just talk about this game. I mean, obviously you mentioned it earlier. And look, I don't blame Scott Frost for trying to get out of it. He's trying to do the best thing for his football program. The fans won't understand it though, because they're like, damn it, this is the 50-year anniversary of the game of the century, a game that we lost, and we still want to honor it. That's what's crazy.
I've always found the OU Nebraska thing so fascinating too, in a way, because I think for people my age at least, like all I remember is the early, middle 90s.
John Blake getting his ass kicked by Tom Osborne.
Yeah, like Nebraska coming down here, scoring 70. There was never that true day after Thanksgiving rivalry game during my lifetime, at least, or at least that I remember.
Well, we got the 2000, 2001.
Sure.
That's the height,
yeah.
that most people will remember.
And I mean, those two teams were top 3 in the BCS rankings. I mean, it was like 1 versus 2 or 1 versus 3 on both those games, I think, if I remember right. And multiple Heisman Trophy winners were in those games for both schools, Eric Crouch and Jason White.
Sure.
So, yeah, I mean, you think about that I was at the game in OU in 2000, and I just remember how fast it came for OU. Like nobody saw like that type of rise this quickly. And I mean, just the access to the program you had back at OU back then was a lot better. And because there weren't as many people covering it. I remember after the game, I was doing freelance radio work for one of those national networks to cover that game down there.
Yeah.
And Mark Mangino, I went in the OU locker room, and I haven't told this story before. I went in the OU locker room.
Did you see a naked Mangino?
So no, I didn't see naked. It's not that kind of. But Mangino's like, "Come on in," and Mangino did an interview on the national network from my phone, and then I went in the OU training room. I was a 20-year-old or 20. I wasn't even 21, and Torrance Marshall was like doing his post rehab, and I handed him my cell phone while he was sitting at the training. On the trainer's table, doing whatever he was doing in the trainer's room, and he did his interview. I mean, I just think about the access we had to the programs back then. And on Thursday practice, I walked across the street from that. Is that Irish bar still across the street from the stadium?
No.
It moved over to
the other side,
the campus corner.
Campus,
so
yeah.
it's basically like in the bar area.
They did what they did is that area they claimed eminent domain, and that's where OU's new athletic dorms are.
So like it was called O'Connell's, right?
Yes, and it was a scene. Yeah, I mean, like people don't understand that never saw that. Like literally, everyone that was in the stadium was on that street corner after games.
Yeah, and we did. So 1620 out of Omaha, I was working with them with Kevin Kugler and a guy named Bob Bruce, and we did our shows from O'Connell's on Thursday and Friday before that 2000 game. And I was kind of like the man on the ground, and I was going into OU's locker room after Thursday practice and bringing guys over across the street to come on, join on set. And in today's world, I mean, we never would get that kind of access. So I just remember that weekend. And that was really, to me, the big turn of OU's program was when they beat Nebraska. Nebraska was up 14-0 in that game. And then they came back and blew Nebraska out in all respects.
Wow. Okay, so the game this year, what's the fan base think? Is it because I know, you see stuff on our board and it's always that stuff back and forth that you don't get involved in, but like, hey, these Nebraska fans really think they got a shot at us this year. What a bunch of dummies. Like, I'm going to even be in trouble for that now. But is it just kind of that, we can, if this happens and this happens, we could win that game? Or is it still kind of a defeatist attitude because of the state of the program right now?
I mean, I think most people are hopeful that if they just play, I mean, I go back to like 2018 Ohio State. They were huge dogs in Columbus that year against Urban Meyer, and they played really well, and they executed, and they had to lead a lot of the game and almost won. And nobody saw that coming. I think that's the biggest thing. I think Nebraska fans know OU is one of the 4 best teams right now in the country. Nebraska's not, and they're not near that. So I think the hope is they can go in there and put up a fight and not just lay down in the first quarter. I mean, I want to say the last time I was in Norman was 2008, and it was 28-0 in the first quarter. Do you remember that game, Kerry?
Was that the Bleeping Hippies game?
No, that was 2004. And it was effing Hillbillies. And
Hillbillies,
I think George Schroeder is the guy that got that on
heard
tape.
it, yeah.
And he reported on that way back when. But that was a bizarre deal. I mean, if you remember, Nebraska's players during warm-ups intentionally kind of threw a lineman in because they used to let the Roughnecks on the field with those guns.
Yeah.
That was the lawsuit.
They were firing the blanks at the Nebraska players, like point blank range. And so Wally Muhammad and I want to say Cornelius Thomas or another guy on the team, like they tossed each other into the Roughnecks, and one of the Roughnecks like hammered into the brick wall on the side and had to be hospitalized. Well, they pressed charges on these Nebraska players, and Nebraska had to go down and appear in court. John Blake had to actually testify on what they were doing in the drills, and I mean it was bizarre.
I forgot John Blake was coaching then from Nebraska.
Former OU coach has to go down to Norman to testify with an incident with his players like severely injuring this Roughneck kid. But yeah, so those were the last 2 trips Nebraska's had to Norman. And they didn't play well, as we know, in either one of those. Then in 2009, Nebraska beat Oklahoma and Lincoln, and then they played each other in the 2010
game,
Big 12 title.
That was the most grueling
game
to watch in the history of road games for me. Landry Jones, he was never going to complete a pass in that game. He just wasn't. It's just everything was a Hail Mary. It was most ridiculous offense I've ever seen.
Well, Nebraska was so good up front on that team that they didn't blitz, so their
and
four-man rush.
Sue was just destroying everybody.
Yeah, the 4-man rush got in every time. I mean, that left tackle you guys had was like a first-round pick, and Sue was destroying that guy. I'm trying to remember who that guy was. He was a really good tackle. You guys had him.
Trent Williams.
Yeah, I mean, he's
the best. He's the best tackle in the NFL. It's kind of like I saw Trent Williams just demolish Von Miller 2 years in a row. And when he got drafted, I was like, Von Miller is never going to be anything in the league. Trent Williams destroyed him. Like, I kind of learned, don't judge someone just based on one game if he's going against another really good player. So,
but yeah, Pelini, what he did, I mean, that 4-man front would get to you, and he would lock everybody up in tight press man coverage, and then he'd always have the 2 safeties back. And, you know, if you were down or couldn't run the ball, you know, you couldn't throw down the field on Nebraska because of those safeties. They would sit back there, and the man safety with the too high look just took away everything. And they were unstoppable defensively because of guys like, I mean, they had like 4 NFL guys on the front 4, and they just shut down everything up front. And I remember they kept trying to throw checkdowns to DeMarco Murray that game, and they're getting blasted. I mean, they're going for like no gain on checkdowns, which never happens. I mean, those type of plays typically give you good yardage.
They were really good. So I know, just judging from what you said, I'm assuming the tight ends are the strongest position on offense. Tell me if that's not correct. What's the strongest position on defense for Nebraska heading into the season?
The front 7, they've got, I mean, they're good at all the linebacker spots. I mean, they returned 17 of their top 20 on defense, and they added a transfer portal linebacker that's going to start on the inside, and he's been really good this spring. His name is Chris Kolarevic from Northern Iowa. So he'll be a factor, but you know, I think what worries me about this game is Nebraska's defense is built for the Big Ten, and you know, what will be their plan to guard like the speedy slot receivers of OU? You know, in the Big Ten, JoJo Domann is a really good nickel hybrid linebacker guy, but you know, he's a 4'6" type guy with a 38-inch vertical. He's a top 5 Pro Football Focus linebacker right now. and he shut down Rondell Moore in a game this year in Purdue. But I don't know how that will look on the hot grass at OU in September, and what will they do to kind of adjust, because as we know, OU is going to have a lot of speed at receiver, and Nebraska is fairly thin at corner right now. They don't have – that's the position that they're trying to go for in the portal. So there's a lot of things to kind of watch. But I love their D-line, and I love those linebackers on defense. I mean, it's as deep of a group as they've had in a few years.
Sounds like it should be a really good test for Oklahoma's offensive line, because I think that's, if you're going to talk about question marks going into 2021 for Oklahoma, I think that's probably where you start at.
And this too, Sean, I mean, everyone believes Eric Gray is going to be a really good runner, but Kennedy Brooks opted out last year. How rusty is he going to be? And they don't have a lot of depth at running back. I mean, they moved H-back and Mikey Henderson over there. They still might be going after a guy in the portal at running back. We don't know. It looks like that's something that they're going to try and go after. But yeah, I would say if there's one thing Nebraska fans can maybe have some positive feels about, it would be their defense, their defense up front against Oklahoma's offense up front.
Yeah, I mean, I think Nebraska's maybe one of their strengths is the front seven, and the weakness of OU might be the O-line. So that to me will be this game. If OU's O-line plays well, I mean, and protects and does what they need to do, they're going to win. But Nebraska could make it interesting if their front seven causes problems and kind of gets to Rattler a little bit, because they do have the ability. I mean, they sacked Ohio State's quarterback, as much as anybody this year. They got after him in that game, and they return everybody: Ty Robinson, Ben Stilley, Casey Rogers, DeAndre Thomas, Damian Daniels. They got a really good group of D linemen coming back, and then, like I said, all their linebackers are back too. So it will be a veteran front. There's a lot of 5th, 6-year guys on the front seven of Nebraska. I think there's 5 6-year seniors that started last year that all came back this year on defense.
When you do your keys to the game, I can give you a key right now. And Eddie, I think you would approve of this. A key for Nebraska offensively is yet another secret first quarter suspension for Perrion Winfrey.
Just got to keep him off the streets of Norman, Oklahoma here over the next, 4 months?
Perrion Winfrey wore, how players have those thigh pads now, Sean, that have like their numbers in them, or, like it'll have, I don't know, like faces or whatever. But Perrion Winfrey's thigh pads, one was Mike Myers from Halloween, and the other was Jason from Jason Voorhees. I'm a little afraid.
Perrion Winfrey got in trouble. You guys heard the story about him and Lincoln getting in trouble the year before, right?
I think I believe so. I don't know if it's
that.
I don't know if it's ever been disclosed.
Yes,
but if
you would,
we're not saying it.
Yeah,
there's a police. And I'm not like giving up anything secret here. There's a police report on it, and he got ticketed for after he took his visit to Lincoln. He came back down to Lincoln to party and hang out. I mean, I just think he had fun down here and wasn't going to come here, but he was jumping on parked cars downtown. Yes. I don't know what. Obviously, I don't know what he was doing beforehand, but he caused some damage to vehicles, and he got ticketed for jumping on parked cars. And the Journal-Star never ran the report because it didn't really have any significance. He wasn't a Nebraska recruit or whatnot, but he had a memorable time in Lincoln.
I heard that there may have been a swan dive onto a hood at one point.
Yeah, so it was.
I'll put it this way, Sean. OU needs more of those guys. I've been saying that for years. I think that it's not a coincidence that Oklahoma's playing a little bit better defensively, and they got some guys that maybe you keep an eye on the weekends.
Yeah, you got guys at D tackle that are not afraid to tackle cars. I mean, that's a pretty good fit right there.
Absolutely.
Hey, Sean, man, I really appreciate it. It was great catching up with you. You gave us way more of your time than you should have, but we really enjoyed it, and you do a great job at Husker Online, and I know we're all looking forward to hopefully seeing you again this year up in the press box. That'd be pretty cool.
I'm looking forward to it, Kerry. It's been a long, long time, and I know Nebraska fans are looking forward to getting down there to Norman.
I guarantee you, if you haven't been down to Norman around the stadium and stuff, it's completely. I mean, it's different from when I was in school, so I can't imagine what
Except
you'll
for the
see
press
when you
box.
arrive at Norman.
The press box
it's
is
the same.
exactly as you remember it.
You might need to
Everything
make sure
else has been facelifted outside of that.
make sure your will's in order before you go up into the press box.
I think we'll be staying in Oklahoma City, I know, and just driving in the morning of, more than likely.
For sure.
All right, Sean, I appreciate it, man. Thank you so much for the time, and hopefully we'll catch up with you a bit more before the season gets going.
All right, guys. Yeah, we'll be doing a lot more of this. I appreciate it, and looking forward to September.
All right, thanks again to Sean Callahan from HuskerOnline.com, and I'm going to tell you, I'm trying to be nice as possible to Husker fans. I don't want them in my timeline anymore.
Just keep Rex Burkhead's name out of your mouth. You'll be fine.
Super Bowl parties and drinking and talking shit on Rex Burkhead did not play out very well for me.
I will say, it seems like as we get done wrapping up that interview, I'm excited for the game now. And I was excited for the game before, but it just it does make you feel a certain way with the names OU and Nebraska.
You have to actually talk about it, though, to actually remind yourself why this is such a big thing. Because most kids are 18 years old. They don't know anything about this.
I'm 34, and I seriously, I know the OU Nebraska thing was big, but it was only because it's been passed down in the family, basically. Like, my uncle played in the 71 game, which I found they found a newspaper from 1971, like the Oklahomans.
Back when it was the Daily Oklahoman?
Yeah, it was it was a 4-page spread. It's actually pretty cool. I'm trying to find it right now.
Game coverage?
So like the preview of the game,
okay.
Which that kind of stuff is badass.
Well, that was newspapers would sell big features like that back in the day, and so they'd put a lot of effort into it.
Sure. I think that the 50-year anniversary thing will be really cool when it's finally out there with the stuff that they have planned, bringing people back. Hopefully people from Lincoln come down. That's one thing we should have asked Sean is I imagine Nebraska still from the mid 90s. That's what I remember the most is oh my God, there are half the stadium's full of Nebraska fans. And it was just because they couldn't get up to Lincoln to see these people at Memorial Stadium.
Yeah, I mean, that would happen a lot.
I would have to think that they still travel well, though.
That stadium got purple when Kansas State started getting good.
Yeah.
And OU wasn't any good.
It'll be fun. And I guess it's kind of a talking point just because we're going into because it was announced last week at the end of the week as far as the 11 a.m. kickoff and all that kind of stuff. For Joe C to issue the type of statement that he did, they have to be pissed off about it.
Yeah, and I think it's just also it's just dealing with the fans but I can tell you this, he takes that shit personally.
Don't you think it was almost like a totality of the situation though? Here we go
so many
again.
Years where they've expressed their
it's not
concern
the 11 a.m. kickoff per se on that weekend. It's just God damn, what do we have to do to not play at 11?
Yeah, and I think it's probably a little frustrating because OU is taking the bullet for the rest of the conference.
Sure. But I get what Fox is doing. I don't fault Fox at all. That's their prime time.
It's what they signed up
and
for.
And that's what they want. And the numbers, to a certain extent, back it up.
The thing about it is, OU, they made their bed. They have to lie in it. And when the national media were coming out and being I always say this, just try and be a little mindful of the fans. They're the ones that are reading your paper or buying subscriptions.
Sure.
So why shit on the fans because they hate try and understand them. Trying to have some that's one thing I've tried to make more over the last few years is try to be more understanding of how the fans view things instead of living in your little myopic world where it's got to be this way or that way.
Yeah. And I get it. I call one today. He's my dad. Not happy with the 11 a.m. kickoffs. And I completely get it. It sucks for everybody. I got friends that own bars and restaurants in Norman. It sucks for them.
Makes you get up early on a Saturday, which you don't like doing.
Nobody wants to do that, especially after, a lot of people. And, it gets into the recruiting side of it. But it's impossible for whoever, Raleek Brown, to fly in from Mater Dei or fly in from Los Angeles that weekend if he's not going to take the red eye out of LA unless Mater Dei has a Thursday night game or something. Yeah. And for a lot of people, it's just not going to work out like that.
And I think the thing about Nebraska and their recruiting strategy is pretty fascinating. I haven't paid a close enough attention to it to know how many guys they're losing out on to bigger programs, but really they do have to have a different, it's just like Oklahoma. They went heavy JUCO. Josh Heupel, when Bob Stoops first got in, Torrance Marshall, and they added to what they had, but they didn't have to keep recruiting that way as they got better. And Nebraska has to at least be honest with itself and say, okay, we're not going to build a roster like every team in the SEC overnight. Like, we have to earn it.
Yeah, and I guess in a way,
it's just like with the defense.
There's a certain level of you got to admit it to yourself before you can start helping yourself, right?
It's just like the defense. It's like it was a cycle. It was like an endless loop of not being able to get the guys you wanted to get because your defense wasn't any good. And now that it's good, you're able to start battling with other teams, bigger Power 5 teams to get those recruits.
Sure. And it helps when I guarantee you, as soon as Nebraska starts finding ways to win football games, all of a sudden all of that becomes a lot easier. I just don't know when that's going to be. Nebraska should never be behind a Purdue, though, or an Illinois.
And they are.
Or Minnesota.
Well, they just, like Penn State, Nebraska, it's bad for college football for them to not be good.
Yeah. And, I think that anybody that has listened to the Unofficial 40 knows that they're almost at too easy of a target as far as the downturn that they've had not to poke fun at them and call them a dead program, everything like that. Which
it's a lot more fun to call them bug eaters when they're good.
Sure, it's kind of like
calling them bug eaters now is just pathetic.
It's kind of like everything in college football, though. When you get those blue bloods, when you get the big name programs like a Notre Dame, like a Texas, who has been non-existent for the last decade, it's just better. It feels right. I think there's more of a nostalgia almost. It feels right when all of those teams are good.
All right, so as we sit here now, OU softball is playing in the Women's College World Series. We won't give any updates because it'll just make the pod dated.
It'll just be weird.
But OU golf, fantastic run, finishes off yesterday. It wasn't ideal in terms of the performance in the championship.
Well, it's unfortunate that like Garrett Reband has run into a problem off the tee, and he has no idea where the
bad tin cup.
Yeah, he has no idea where the ball's going right now off the tee. And I think anybody that is, I can't even say that I've played golf competitively, but anybody that has played golf and knows when you step up onto a tee box and have no idea where the ball's going, it's just kind of sad. It sucks. I genuinely feel bad for the guy that he got to basically the peak of his collegiate career and couldn't really contribute. Yeah, couldn't really contribute. And I hope he figures it out. I hope he finds a way to start making money. It's insane to think that Tuesday night he went from getting, the promotion of a lifetime and getting a full year exemption on the Korn Ferry Tour to being benched into match play in the quarterfinals.
The benching did not work.
No, it didn't work like Ryan Hibble hoped it did. But, to be match play the last 5 years, it's incredible. Garrett Reband's going to end up being one of the more accomplished players that this program has put out onto the professional ranks, and to see it end with him and Quade Cummins, Jonathan Brightwell's 1 year in Norman, it was a hell of a run. Pepperdine was unbelievable. I don't think that you can talk about Oklahoma losing the national championship as much as Pepperdine won it. I mean,
absolutely,
getting up and down from where they were on a lot of the holes, particularly on the back nine, and being able to execute under pressure, it was incredible. I was kind of in awe.
It was the way I would analyze it would be, yes, OU missed a lot of putts.
Yeah,
but
if you're going to win a national championship, you got to make those, and they just didn't fall.
Pepperdine's putts were shorter.
Yeah,
I mean, they were they weren't hitting.
I don't know if they missed a 10-footer though, in the last of the last hour of coverage, which
Like Reband had so many putts that just didn't break.
He left 8 and 9. On 8 and 9, he had chances to cut it to 1. As poorly as he started, you have a chance to get to the back 9 only down 1, and he wasn't able to make any putts. And
I know it's disappointing that Quade Cummins' day kind of fell apart.
Yeah, he just didn't play well.
But he was the reason they got there in the first place.
Sure. He just didn't play well. And you know,
by the way, you know the biggest thing about watching college golf.
Well, I mean, unfortunately, we had to watch the last 2 days on the Golf Channel. That was about as bad of a production as I've ever seen. It was
sure they don't give a lot of money for that.
And I love the Golf Channel. Like I don't want to take shots at it.
It's still compelling, though.
I mean, it's great. I mean, Tuesday night during the semifinal stuff. I have no connection to those guys, and I was nervous as hell watching Quade finish up.
Yeah, what's interesting watching college golf versus watching the PGA every weekend or every other weekend. Like college golfers, you can tell not real big into the strength and conditioning part of that. I mean, I'm sure they do some minimum stuff, but there's some stick people out there playing golf.
I think that like sometimes you probably think that some of the PGA Tour guys are a little bit bigger than you really like.
Because you only think like Bryson and
Xander's,
Rory.
Yeah, like Xander's not a very big guy.
And Phil's never been a weightlifting guy.
No, I don't think Billy Horschel is going into the weight room every morning. I mean, a bunch of those guys do.
But I mean, like
when
guys
you get
like
out of
Tiger
school, you start
and Bryson and Rory, and like you think about all those guys that and Brooks Koepka. I mean,
I don't think Spieth's not that big. I mean, he's
not.
He's a decently tall guy, but I don't think he's just.
He probably does
massive.
just enough in the weight room.
I mean, all those guys. Once you don't have to worry about school, you're going to start working out a lot more.
Yeah.
But I mean, OU's what they've been able to do over the last 5 years. Obviously, winning a national championship with that group. You know, Quade was a freshman on that team.
Well, just getting Brightwell in this year.
Sure. I mean, it was awesome. And, you know, the future of the Oklahoma golf program is extremely bright with some of the guys that they're bringing in. And, you know, I think anybody that pays attention to the junior amateur rankings or the junior tournaments just in the state of Oklahoma knows this is a hell of a state for golf. And I think it was noted in the semifinals when Oklahoma and Oklahoma State were both in it. You know, 20% of the rosters were represented by guys from the state of Oklahoma.
Yeah, I mean, they were reading off, you know, hometowns and all that stuff.
You know, Austin Eckroat. I mean, the state of Oklahoma and Austin Eckroat, you know, the kid obviously from Edmond North in Oklahoma State, and then Quade from Weatherford. That's 2 kids on the Walker Cup team. That's insane. And it's really cool. So I hope they
and what Logan McAllister's from OCC?
Yeah, OCA.
OCA, yeah.
He went to he's from Oklahoma City, which is really cool. So it'll be fun to watch here over the next couple of years. As long as Ryan Hibble's running that program down there, they're going to be extremely good.
I really like him.
Yeah, he's awesome.
All right, so you've been out. I guess we should touch on this a little bit. Josh and Bob, they're both on vacation this week. You went out to team camp yesterday.
Yeah, I did, and you know, I finally got some good Talon Shetron video or Talon Shetron video. So he
could be your name.
He looks great. There's no reason to think anything different. They're going to be, I think, as a whole though, and Josh will be able to kind of expound on this next week as far as kind of recapping. He did a little bit last week when he was up here on Tuesday doing the spring tour. 2023, 2024 is incredible in the state of Oklahoma. Then you add in Gentry Williams. Then you add in, whoever you want, a Jacob Sexton. The state of Oklahoma is doing really well right now as far as producing talent, and it was good to see
a bunch of... you came away from watching Norman North going, wow, they got two really good young guys.
I think the Duncan Parham kid's really good. And I didn't realize that his dad played at OU. I had no idea. Duncan Parham Sr. That wasn't a name that I was familiar with.
I'm going to say tight end. I think he's...
And that's kind of what Duncan plays. He's a little bit of a, I guess you call him like a hybrid. I think more he's going to be an outside linebacker. Looks good coming off the edge. I thought the Jonathan Wolford or Ashford kid from Edmond Santa Fe, one of Shetron's teammates, looks really good. He's a 2023 offensive lineman. Jinx obviously is loaded once again. Surprise, surprise. It was pointed out to me that there is a kid that's going to be a freshman, a 2024 kid at Jinx, with the last name of Countless, and he's Rocky's nephew.
Really?
That they think is.
I have heard about him.
They think he's going to be pretty damn good. So
yeah, Duncan Parham, he was tight end from 86 to 88.
I had no idea. I truly didn't. I had no idea.
Back in the Bone days. So he would have played with Jamel. He would have played with Charles. Would have played... yeah, he was a good player. I don't remember what he did in the NFL. If he just hung on or if he had a cup of coffee or what. But
sure.
I definitely remember him. He was originally from Florida.
It's kind of wild.
So I guess he just stayed in Norman.
Never expected that.
One thing I think we do have to talk about, and I think I can talk about this confidently because we have had Josh's input, is Luther Burden.
Yeah.
His visit to Missouri that's coming up. And kind of so I'll start out with kind of what I posted first, and then Josh has kind of kept us in the loop on some stuff. And there's been some, I don't know, taking of info and misrepresenting it or something. I don't know.
Sure.
What I was told is that he's been fishing around for someone to make him a commitment video, which has kind of become a bigger thing in St. Louis. Thanks for not screwing me over, Tyson. And so...
yeah, at least you didn't have to drive up there or anything.
Tyson Ford. Big ups.
Man.
Still talk to him every once in a while. Good
Do
kid.
you?
Yeah, good kid.
It's funny.
Because I talk a lot of NBA, and I think he likes the NBA. But what does that mean? No one said, okay, he needs a commitment, a flip video, or he needs a commitment video for Missouri. As I said on the board.
Oh God, I hope the new wave isn't a flip video. That seems like a much.
No, yeah, that would be terrible. That would be worse than 10 teams. Here's my top 20 teams.
The flip video seems like it's in the same chapter or the same neighborhood as a transfer portal entry putting out a top 25.
So this was the deal. Like, we were trying to figure out, okay, so why would he do a video if he wasn't flipping? But then you think about all the COVID stuff that's gone. Didn't he play in the spring season?
Yeah, he played 2 football seasons.
He played 2 football seasons.
He played in Missouri, and then he transferred over to East St. Louis and played in Illinois.
So, I mean, the kid's been, one, busy, and the other is you just haven't had the chance to be like regular or take visits or do this stuff. Like, maybe he just wants
it's new for everybody.
Yeah,
right
maybe
now.
he just wants to say, like, I've been cooped up for a while. I'm going to make this official now. I mean, maybe that's what he wants to do. We don't know. But I was never told he's doing a commitment video for Missouri. Now, Josh has been all over this, and a lot of it's been kind of what he's relayed to us behind the scenes. There doesn't seem to be any worry on OU's end that anything is going. And basically, this is something that he just told Missouri he would do, kind of because he was tired of getting bugged by him all the time.
I think that's probably the best way to put it. It doesn't seem like there's too much cause for concern. He's still visiting Oklahoma. What is it, 2 weeks from now?
And that's what I said initially. I was like, you guys can freak out about this if you want, and some choose to do it, some others. But let's say he even, like, there was a thing last night, like Hayes Fawcett had teased. He's the guy that does a bunch of the edits for people. And Josh says he's a really good guy. I've never really had any dealings with him, but I'm sure he is. But he teased that there was a big announcement coming from a 5-star. And so we thought, oh God, is he gonna?
Yeah, just it's kind of one of those like moments of like, oh no, here we go.
And so that was like at 7:15, like right in the middle of golf, and I was like, I really don't want this to blow up at 7:15, and I just want to watch golf, and but it was something total. It was like, was it a kid's top 5 or something, or was it someone that was committed to Clemson or something? I can't remember what it was.
I don't think it was a kid that's committed as much as it's a kid that's visited Clemson and now saying Clemson is his leader, which I know
that's what it was. Yeah. So,
like, personally, I just kind of roll my eyes.
I don't think there's any reason to worry about Luther Burden, although, our Missouri site's a huge site.
Sure.
And they're getting excited about the possibility of
Josh talked about it last week. I mean, I think that Missouri staff, he was talking about Gentry Williams.
Drinkwitz.
Drinkwitz has done an excellent job up there. I mean, the guy is he's a little bit like Lincoln in that I think he loves the recruiting game. And I can't remember who it was, but I remember going back all the way to signing day. And I think it was Drinkwitz's first signing day up there. And they put out the video of him celebrating. They got somebody at the last second.
I remember that, yeah.
And it's like, this guy loves that shit.
Yeah.
He loves it. And that's what you want if you're a program looking to strike rich, and especially in a conference that's as competitive as the SEC.
So, I mean, that's basically where all that stuff is.
Sure.
I don't think there's any cause for concern.
No. At least not quite yet.
But like we've been saying the whole time, it's going to change with kids being able to go on visits. And the initial report on him was his mom, his dad, his girlfriend, I don't know.
Yeah, it was like the whole family's going down there.
His dad seems to be kind of, I don't know what his dad is. I don't want to read too much into just a tweet.
Likes the game.
I mean, I think all parents like being told
Who wouldn't?
Their kid's special.
Sure. I think that's completely fair.
That's my new leaf. I'm trying to understand everybody's perspective.
Proud of you. Looking at everybody.
Instead of just being a dick.
Very
all the
Dr.
time.
Phil-ish. Let's put you on a national television show to exploit you now. That's what Dr. Phil does.
Hey, that chick made a lot of money. The Cash Me Outside chick made a lot of money on WhatsApp or on OnlyFans.
Yeah, now that she's 18. Kind of creepy. Even now.
I think she's kind of gross.
What's her name? Like Danielle Bruglia or something like that?
Yeah.
It's weird.
Good
rapper, though.
I was trying to...
Bet you weren't ready for that.
No, I've heard her stuff. I don't listen. Like, I was thinking about this today. Like, you know how many road trips we've taken together? Like, we've been sitting in a car for like 14, 15 hours with each other.
I told somebody with the Oklahoma State baseball program that's headed out to Tucson this weekend.
Oh, yeah.
I was like, yeah, I've been there. Wasn't too impressed with it.
Oh, no.
Wasn't too impressed with Tucson.
Tempe is great. When you get to Tucson, no.
Oh, there's nothing better than Tempe and Scottsdale.
But it's like
that area.
It's so ridiculous because, like, you and I really don't have anything in common. You don't like movies. You're not into music, really.
I like AMC. I know that's up for a lot of people in the stock market right now.
Is it really?
It was.
Bolton?
Well, I think it's down now. I know a lot of buddies sold it yesterday.
You love gambling. I'm not a gambler.
The Odd Couple.
But we always got along, and we never we never even fought, even once. Like, never even got on each other's nerves.
No. 2 weeks on the road is a long time. We'll say that.
Bowl games are nice.
Bowl games just a different. It's a different breed, and I think this year it'll be like so exciting to just get back out on the road that it won't be too bad.
Yeah. So.
Those were the days of yesteryear, though. I don't know how often we'll have to do that anymore, just as far as like the Army game being followed by, a bowl game being followed by the Army game.
Yeah, as long as OU's good.
Yeah, that was at the height of it, though, with driving from New Orleans to go cover Joe Mixon's commitment in San Antonio.
Oh, yeah.
I guess there haven't been too many of those. You were sick at the end, though, right?
Yeah. I just got
Did you even go to the game over there?
No, I just stayed in my hotel room and slept.
That's right. Hell, it would be nice just to have the Army game and the Under Armour game back this year. I guess I call it the Army game. Then what is it called now? The All-Star game? It's not even the Army game anymore.
It's the All-American Bowl or something like that.
I guess the one thing that probably does need to be brought up before we get out of here is, Oklahoma, the transfer portal. Obviously, with the Bradford news this week with LSU, by all signs, it seems like there's definitely going to be some interest. And then the Keelan Robinson thing is kind of interesting from Alabama, just for the fact that I had heard that maybe he had some interest in Oklahoma at one point. You can't look past the fact that he's from the D.C. area, and Caleb Williams and Joseph Wette as well. I'm sure that they're doing some recruiting.
I should have gotten on the Bob follow check train.
I don't think that he's too active. Talking about Keelan Robinson.
Okay.
And if he is, I don't think that'd be a situation that he would be following Caleb Williams because I'm sure that they've already followed each other way back when.
Yeah. Known each other forever. The Cale Gundy is what... Or not Cale Gundy. DeMarco Murray is what you want to pay attention to on that, usually.
And he's moving in silence anyways. Whoever knows what... I don't even know if DeMarco Murray's still a coaching W. And I say that jokingly just because I don't see him out a lot.
I'm trying to think if there's something on the tip of my tongue that I've been meaning to bring up to you. Something like that's been fascinating from just pop culture, and I can't remember what it is.
I don't know.
Oh, I know what it is. A couple days ago, I followed Steven Alexander on Facebook just because I figured it'd be good to...
Oh, like the former OU player?
Yeah, Cooper's dad.
Yeah, Cooper. We went and saw him at
He's
the end
just
of last
known
week.
as Cooper's dad now.
We went and saw him
I
at the
did
end
it
of
right
last
after
week.
you
He's
guys
gonna
saw
be
him
good.
and just raved about it.
That kid is going to be awesome.
But I was like, I remember signing up for that, and I was like, I think he's still really close to Justin Fuente. Should I ask him about his linebacker?
Man, that is insane.
Is there details on what that relationship was at all? I know I've read stuff on the board, but I don't want to throw out just
the
weird
only thing
stuff.
that I've seen is that it was a 40-year-old male that was found dead, which kind of weird because we're talking about a freshman in a freshman in college that has now been arrested for the homicide of it, and there's expected to be 2 more arrests. I don't know if they're going to be charged with homicide or with manslaughter or murder or whatever, but it's just very awkward, very strange.
I mean, we see a lot of strange shit, but
not like that.
Murdering.
You don't see that often.
Like the strangest that we thought it would get would be Trajan Bridges' armed robbery.
I still don't know if we'll ever. I mean, hopefully not see another story like that. Which I don't think that there's much update on any of that. I have they been? Is arraigned the right word? I truly don't know.
Oh, I'm sure. Yeah, I mean, out on bail and.
I mean, it basically
probably just
the bridge has been burned. They're no longer part of the Oklahoma program.
Is that a pun?
No, it's not, but it should be now. I didn't even think about it.
You didn't even know what you said.
No, I didn't even put 2 and 2 together. Shitty situation, but it is kind of like the calm before the storm, though, as we sit here on June 3rd, because Bob and Josh return, and then camps start firing up, and then you got the barbecue coming in a couple weeks.
Yeah, it's gonna be awesome.
And once you get through the barbecue, it's like, holy shit! Look down at the calendar, and Big 12 Media Days will be here before you know it.
In person, even.
Yeah, down in Dallas.
I wonder if they'll limit how many people get to go. That's what I'm worried about.
I don't know.
Well,
it's at Jerry World, so
you
can kind of, I guess, socially distant. Should be good, though.
I had to get one F-bomb in on this podcast. Other than all the ones Callahan dropped.
Yeah. Gotta watch
Dirty
that guy.
sailor.
Gotta watch that guy.
All right. That will do it for this week's edition.
Talking Nebraska football kind of makes me want to go drink Busch Light. Get off the Natty Light train and drink Busch Light.
Is that what you did back in the college days?
No, it just seems like that would be a big beer seller up in Nebraska. That and Bud Light. Busch Light, Bud Light.
I think Schlitz still has a little sliver of. I think that might be their PBR up there.
I've never been there. I've never been to Nebraska.
It's a fun place.
Never been to
Lincoln's a fun town.
I don't think I've ever been in that area of the world, like north of Kansas.
I've told you this before. It's the first
north
time
of Kansas City.
Being in Lincoln, Nebraska, is the first time I've ever seen a blind man be hit by a car and thrown across the intersection.
I'm not laughing.
It was the first time.
It was the second time.
There wasn't, thank God.
Well, probably
some dude in a Camaro, like a 70s Camaro, just started raining, and he couldn't stop in time, and that dude went flying.
Like en route, like game day, en route to the game?
No, this was when I was a little kid.
Oh, okay. I've never been to Lincoln, Nebraska. I don't know what's going on up there.
We had to go to Lincoln, Nebraska every year because my little sister was always making the national roller skating, figure skating finals.
It seems like something that would be hosted in Nebraska.
I think my parents just
Is
got
that
so
Lincoln
used
or
to...
Omaha?
It's in Lincoln.
Oh,
yeah.
It is. I've never been to Omaha for that matter.
I think my parents were just like, okay, we've taken the boys to baseball and football, like that, and so we have to find a sport for our daughter now because that's all we know to do.
It's fair.
And so she was a competitive roller skater.
Didn't even know that was a thing.
I want to know if it's still a thing. I bet it is. She never won, though. So they wasted a lot of money.
She got followed by something that's called 405 Burger Bar. They just got a free shout-out, but says it's coming to Campus Corner. Interesting.
Influencer of the year, ladies and gentlemen.
They better give me something free. JK.
You need to figure out how to make some damn money off of being the influencer of the year at some point.
I think my reign is over, so I think I missed the window, which kind of sucks.
How do you miss the window?
I mean, I got to run for it again next week or next year, I guess.
Oh, you didn't win this year?
Huh? So I'm no longer. Is it JB, the guy that actually does like influencing in Oklahoma City?
The rapper?
Yeah.
Producer?
Yeah. Like does I was gonna say civil rights stuff, but it's not that.
No, he's involved in some of that stuff.
Yeah, very much so.
Social justice and things.
Social justice. That was the word I was trying to think of.
All right.
Actually does stuff for the community. Other than like just making memes and bullshitting.
And promoting natural light.
Yeah.
All right. Appreciate it, Eddie. Josh and Bob will be back next week. We should get to go on a vacation sometime.
I'm on vacation every day. Living the dream.
I'm right there with you. All right. Thanks for listening, everybody. We'll be back again next week with another edition of the Unofficial 40 podcast from Soonerscoop.com.